How many of you have walked away from a conversation thinking that didn't go quite as well as I had planned? I mean, it's something that's happened to all of us at one time or another, sometimes more frequently than others, and oftentimes and oftentimes more frequently than we would like. So, what are some of the things that are going on in those conversations? What did we do wrong? What could we have done differently? How could we have approached it differently? So, we're going to go through a series of conversations or a series of discussions about communication, building better communication techniques. Because in the end of the day, we are communicative creatures. We are social creatures. We like to communicate with each other. And when those communication connections fail, it creates problems. It creates strife. We get derailed from what we want to accomplish. So hopefully we're going to spend, a little bit of time talking about some of the signs and some of the things that we can do differently. So grab a cup of coffee and let's dig in. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in our body when we're having a tough conversation. A couple of different things are happening. Our brain chemicals start changing, our neurons start firing, and it's creating this kind of a fight or flight thing. Our hands get sweaty, our mouth gets dry, our amygdala hijacks our prefrontal cortex, and the rational part of our brain shuts down. And we're starting to react instead of act. So imagine a situation where you're going into a conversation and it's a tough conversation. Maybe it's with a partner, whether it's a business partner or a relationship partner, a coworker, a subordinate. Maybe it's your supervisor. Maybe it's a client, and things aren't going the way you want. How do you feel? What's going on physiologically in your body? Maybe your gut is tightening up. Well, when that's happening, when our amygdala is firing, when our neurons are in this fight or flight mode, we're not at our best as far as thinking. Our blood pressure is going up. We're not getting that oxygen to the brain that we need to be as effective as we want to be. So, what are some of the things? Well, first of all, what can we do? We can recognize that, right? Recognize what are the signs within you that are causing you to react and respond differently than how you really want to. Is your breathing becoming shallower? Okay, well, if that's the case, take that deep breath, breathe in, take a moment. It's okay to pause. Is your jaw clenched up? Is you're feeling that pain in your jaw? Okay, if it is, open your mouth a little bit. Take your tongue, put it just to the roof of your mouth, just behind your teeth. Just doing that can keep you from clenching your jaw. Are your arms crossed? Are your legs crossed? What happens if you uncross those? Try and sit down. Now, that may be somewhat counterintuitive because you are in this difficult conversation, which can feel like a fight. And when you're feeling like you're in a fight, you're wanting to get yourself ready for it. You want to protect yourself. You want to close yourself in. Taking that extra step to take that breath, to take a step back, to think about being intentional about what you want to do, how you want to act, what you want to say is going to help you be a more effective communicator. Not just recognizing when this is happening to you, but it's also important to recognize when it's happening to the person you're communicating with. If you see that person shutting down and you see that person, closing down and looking down at the ground or being angry, being red in the face, clenching their jaw, making fists, continuing to do what you're doing, whatever it is you're saying, however you're approaching it, if you continue down that path, they're not going to hear you. And what's more important? Is it more important that they hear you and understand your perspective, or is it more important for you to be able to convince them that you're right? If you're approaching the conversation of, I'm going to convince you I'm right, it's probably going to be a difficult conversation because oftentimes people perceive, well, if you're right, that means I'm wrong. And that's how we approach a lot of conversations. If we can turn it around from not a right or wrong or my way or the highway type of a conversation, then we can open up that communication pathway. So you're recognizing these signs in yourself, and then you're recognizing the signs in the other person. Maybe it's somebody you have a relationship with and you've seen this type of behavior before. So you know, okay, what can I do? What could I do differently to stop the problem or to impact the communication struggle that we're having right now? Easy one. Take that deep breath. Pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Create space. Silence can be your friend. It can be uncomfortable for a lot of people, yours truly included sometimes, but using that silence not to make somebody feel uncomfortable, but to actually just center yourself, stop engaging in a way that's going to cause the other person to feel like you're fighting them, that you're pushing them, that you're attacking them, and just take that. Think about it. How can you identify how your body's feeling? How can you identify what's going on with the other person, and what can we do? That stopping, that taking that deeper breath is one technique. The words we use are also really important. You know, are we saying words that are going to provoke more problems? You know, are these them's fighting words type of conversations? You know, things such as "you should have," or "why didn't you," or "any competent person would," or "this is all your fault." Um, Triggers for me are "you always," or "you never," or I always like when somebody says, "well, frankly," or "to be honest." It's like, oh, so you weren't being honest with me before. Those types of words, like the "you should have," it's all about pointing to what the other person did or didn't do. Maybe there's another way to say that. "Why didn't you?" Again, was a pointing words as putting judgment onto somebody else. What if you change that conversation and said, is there another way that we could have handled this differently? Notice I said we, because I'm including myself in the conversation, um, including myself in the solution, potentially including myself in the problem, because it is possible that I've contributed to whatever happened. But more importantly, I'm trying to use some inclusive language. Is there another way we could have handled this? What do you think we could have done differently? Or even what could have happened differently? What prevented this from being a complete success? Now we're being inquisitive instead of accusatory. Um, Using words such as "any competent person" or any professional would have done this. Again, you're leading that conversation with, "Oh, now you're insulting me." So how can we back off of those judgmental type of questions? How can we back off of the pointing the finger at things? Now, of course, there are times when somebody has done something wrong. And I think if we stick to the facts, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, kind of a process to use for identifying when somebody's done something in a way they shouldn't, and how to communicate that effectively without the judgment and just sticking to the facts. One of the little pet peeves I have is when people say "you always" or "you never." Rarely is always or never true. Um, I don't always do anything other than so far, I've always woken up every day. I suppose that's a pretty safe one, but that won't be true forever, hopefully. Um, Well, I guess not really, hopefully. Hmm. So think about the words that we're using. Um, Particularly if I'm in a difficult conversation, an argument, or a conversation I'm concerned about, I can tend to speed up my speech. I can tend to talk more quickly. Slowing things down, taking that deep breath, gets oxygen to my brain, gives me time to think about what I want to say, and come up with what is the best way that I can actually communicate this in a way that's not going to cause the other person to be defensive. Again, what is my goal in the conversation? Is my goal to get you to agree with my perspective? It's a valid goal. It's just a difficult goal in a lot of conversations. Is my goal for you to understand my perspective? Okay, that's probably a little bit easier, but it may require me to first understand what your perspective is. Think about it. When I come into a conversation and it's all about me and me telling you what I want and what I need, where does that leave you? Where does that leave room for you? If, on the other hand, I come into the conversation asking about how things are working for you, what your struggles are, what's working well, now the conversation is about you. And then we can transition to what my needs are. Just again, these are just different techniques that you can try to use to get through that difficult conversation. And I have these conversations with my clients quite frequently. I'm an employment attorney, I'm a public speaker, I'm a mediator. So, in many different contexts, I'm having these conversations with people and trying to get them to improve how they're communicating. Um, a big pushback I get is, well, I don't have time for this. You know, I don't want to have a conversation with my employees, a 10-minute long conversation every time they're not doing their job. Absolutely a valid position. My question is, well, how much time are you spending right now? I mean, if you look at the amount of time that you've had the same conversation with this person without seeing any changes, the time you're spending with me now, talking with me about the issues, trying to figure out different ways to handle this, the time you spend thinking about it on your drive home, when you're at home, when you wake up in the day about this issue that's happening with how this person's performing or doing or working or acting. How much time are you already spending on it? What if you use that time that you're already spending a little bit more productively? And by productively, you're having that question about what is their perspective? You're figuring out different ways to open up the communication pathways. If my goal is just to have you hear me and I don't plan on hearing you, you're probably going to run into problems. I'm going to run into problems. So one of the things I want you to think about is, what are some of the phrases or words that trigger you? Is a particular statement or comment? What words, when you hear them, they make your blood pressure rise? Write those down. Get out a piece of paper. Commit to noticing when you use those same words with others. And let's talk about ways, think about ways to get that out of you. Another, I think, important tools to consider is the me versus you statements. When I'm using a you statement, it comes across as blaming oftentimes. I statements can more explain the impact of the person's action. You never return my calls, right? That's an accusation. What if I turn that around to, when I didn't hear back from you within a few days, I worry that my concerns aren't being addressed or that you don't care. Now I'm talking about how their actions impact me. You're being unreasonable about this distribution, whatever it happens to be. Again, a judgment. I'm pointing at the other person about what they're doing. What if we turned around? Is there a way I can put it in an I statement? I'm struggling to understand how we can make this distribution work within the way that, within the framework of what we have. How do we want to have that conversation? By taking it from the blaming and turning it into an open, what are the solutions, or how is this impacting me? It can change that tone of the conversation. Oh, time for another sip of coffee. But Rob, what about when the other person does this? They haven't listened to you. They're not following your rules. They're blaming me for everything. what do I do? They're using these you statements. What do I do? Well, first of all, you can't control what they do. All you can do is control you. So first of all, you don't have to mirror it back. You don't have to start going in with them with the you statements. Respond with the I statements. Focus on facts and timelines and not judgments. When I start giving my opinions about things, I start running into problems because you may not agree with my opinions. When I talk about facts, it's much different. So what do I mean by that? Let's have a situation where an employee is constantly late. They're supposed to be at work at 9 o'clock and they're always showing up at 9:05, 9:10, 9:15. And they've got many times valid excuses. The traffic was a problem, alarm didn't go off, had to take the kids to school, whatever it is. Now, one possible approach is you keep coming in late. That can't happen. You need to stop. You're ruining everything. That's kind of maybe a little overboard, but I've heard people say it that way. Another way would be to maybe start with you came into work today at 9:10. Work is supposed to start at 9 o'clock. When you don't show up on time, I'm not sure if you're going to be coming in. Other people have to take over your job duties for a little bit, and it creates a problem. Now, notice I did start with the you, but I didn't start with you're always late. You can never be here on time. I said you arrived today at 9:10. They can't argue with that because it is an absolute truth. They may have all sorts of reasons. And then I followed up with, it's important for you to be here at 9 o'clock. I'm stating a fact and I'm stating what my expectations are. And then I can go into when you don't arrive on time, this is what happens. This is the impact that you're having on us. So you're focusing on facts, not judgments. And then model the communication the way you want to you want to receive it. Let's say you showed up to work. Would you want somebody, the second you're in there, jumping on you and saying, why the hell were you late again? Or maybe you could recognize, I'm seeing a pattern where you're not arriving at 9 o'clock. Is there something going on that's impacting your ability to be here at 9 o'clock? Notice I say I'm not saying be here on time. I'm sticking with a fact because again, on time, that's a judgmental thing. Well, it's true. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's already creating a situation where this person is wrong. Maybe we find out that, okay, no matter what we do, this person is not going to show up at 9 o'clock because they've got to drop off their child at school and that's at 8:45 and it's all the way across town. There's just no way to get here. And they can't drop off the child sooner. Okay, well, can we make adjustments to the start time? Well, okay, what if we said, okay, instead of coming at 9, can we agree that you'll be here at 9:15? Having that conversation and being inquisitive can help us understand the other person's perspective a little bit better. So again, think about how often do you respond with, or do I respond with attacks of our own? When are we using you as a way to attack them? Or am I pointing that finger? Well, once heard, many times I've heard, when you have one finger pointing at the other person, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you, thumb still pointing at you, if you can tell. See? So in other words, although I may be pointing out something to you, there's also going to be my part. I'm not suggesting that you only focus on your part in an issue or a problem. I don't think you should ignore it either. I think it's okay to be able to acknowledge what your part is and be able to still have that conversation. So we talked about a number of different things. We talked about these me versus you statements, talked about certain fighting words and what's happening in the brain. Think about those, see if there's a way to put those into practice. Our next section, we're going to be talking a little bit about intentional communication, how to effectuate change and resolve conflicts, about our goals and what we're going to do. But that's going to be enough for today. So enjoy your cup of coffee, cup of tea, cup of water, whatever you enjoy, And I look forward to talking to you guys next time.